of things. So first of all, there's some contextual things you should know about Iowa and Kentucky. First, in many respects, they're very similar. Mostly rural state, but a few urban, 300 students total. But we've had a law since 2002. So how can that be? This law is still on the books. It's because in many respects, in Iowa, there were some fundamental, not just in name only because they receive public funds. If they were going to receive public funds, they would be public schools. They'd be public in every way, shape, and form. So the law was written that way. So it wasn't, oh, hey, we got to find some way of being fast and loose with everything, and then, here, give me some money to do it. But rather, the public purpose of schools, the public mission, the public trust, public accountability, all was written into the law. And because of that, at first, people were very afraid. I remember fighting against this law, but once it took place, because of the influence that was exercised in the writing and the care and the sort of precision of it, they had even had, well, we're going to have a cap of 10. There'd be at most 10 per year that could go forward from the state. And at this stage, the highest amount of charters there was ever in the state of Iowa was in 2008, and they got up to 8. Even when they even pulled off the caps. Oh, it must be the caps. Well, it couldn't have ever been the caps because they never had even 10 applied. And part of this, and so this is the part that I want folks to hear. I'm not saying that this can automatically happen here, but if they can, these are the things to push for. Number one, school boards are the ones that grant charter authorization, local school boards in Iowa. Not from some other standing group. So all those things as possibilities that Susan talked with you about, well, she's right. There are all different kinds of ways that these can be done. But it matters. If you have, for example, just this standalone organization at the state level, appointed by our governor or something, that's going to be a very different kind of thing. And while there are some strictures, and so that's also a thing to know too, every state is different because of, like, their state constitution. So certain areas we hope should be, that might be possible in other states may not be here with regard to like non-sectarian and those kinds of things. There are some things that way that help make a boundary, right, with regard to certain things. There are other things that are really about our choices. And so making sure that these really are publicly accountable through the public mechanisms that we use. We have duly elected school boards in Kentucky, and that's how those things work. And I would also argue if the SBDM law and so forth, I think those kinds of things should apply. So all those kinds of tethers really matter. The other thing is that all the other ways that there were some types of public kind of tethers, those things were put in the Iowa laws as well. So that if there were federal, state, local laws, all those, everyone was subject to those. And because those public schools were the ones that granted the charter and the ones that could revoke the charter and the ones that had to be appealed to every year and given a presentation to every year, then that meant that everyone that was hired at that public charter school was a public school employee and a public district employee. They also could be part of teachers' unions. They were part of the state's pension system. So in many respects, in fact, the law title in Iowa is called Charter Schools and Innovation Zone Schools. So I hear we have this like districts of innovation kind of thing here. So it's sort of treated that way in Iowa. And so because of that, all those same kinds of things applied. In terms of having these EMOs or others that would come in, those actually were prohibited in the Iowa law that you could contract with folks outside of. And so that also is something that was a helpful provision because they were not going to be a conduit to privatization. So these were going to be for public, for creating public citizens and done by public. So they wrote in the law too how you could apply. It had to come from at least 50% of the parents and 50% of the teachers at the school in order to be able to go with your application. If you can't just go and apply, you have to have that if you are trying to convert a school. And if you're trying to create a school, you also have to have that same kind of population, or be able to show that kind of base, I guess, of support when they go to the school board in order to apply. Finally, I would say that with regard to school districts that were very small, in Iowa, what they did have was the provision for districts to go together. And so those were called innovation zones. So you could have 2 or 3 districts go together, and they would be a zone, and that they could themselves have, and it would operate like a bigger district, and it's still the same kinds of things went forward. With regard to, let's see if there's other things. Oh, one of the things I think that is, it's kind of sleight of hand, that our publics forget about all the other results in terms of how kids grow and develop in schools. And I think that that's also a problem here to look at for public charter schools as well, in that I think that the challenge is less upon let's try them and only if they work with their results, then they may or may not be okay. In Iowa, they said no, they have to be about the right purpose. They have to be about being inclusive. They have to offer special education. They have to be able to have all these different kinds of things in order to what kids get and what they need and what they deserve. It wasn't the shift that's happened in our kind of our perspectives to just say something's good if the results are there. And often those results are quite narrow. So I would also argue that here in Kentucky, as this possibility comes before us, that we should not wait and talk and worry mostly about, well, which ones and which models across the country have the right results. That's the wrong question. That is the wrong question. Don't look at the results. Look at the intent. Look at the purpose. The places where public charter schools are still about being about helping human beings grow for a public purpose, for well-rounded, whole children, then those are the places and states that you should look at. And Iowa's not the only one. There are several other states that have very tightly written public charter school laws in order to make sure that schools stay about the purpose for public education, that they make sure that kids are entitled to getting all the kinds of advantages that public schools bring. And if you look only at the results, which one was fast at getting their scores up, likely a bad metric, and then follow that, we're going to miss the point here. And so I hope that, and I certainly will take questions along with everyone else about things, but I think it's really important to not play the game about results and to really look at how things are organized, what purpose are they there for, and what kinds of ways that schools are put together. In Iowa, they have to be all about the same financial reporting and so forth because they go right through the school district. So that's why it's the same. So there's no way that they can sort of get around things. And those charter schools then aren't really looked upon as bad then in some respects because they're just like we would look at our innovation schools. So I don't know that they're needed. I'm not for them. But I want to make sure that I'm for good schools. And good schools will be about these public purposes and about these ends and not just try to get test score results up. The last thing I guess I would say is this, and it's a thing about not only making sure you look at the front end of charters and how you apply and how you create all the laws and things like that, not the back end results. But I've tried to do this a lot, and I don't do it as well as I should. But I think you should never say the words charter schools without putting the word public in front of it. I think you need to marry those, because if you want to be about a law that's for private charters, just like for private schools, I don't have a problem with private schools. Don't accept any public money. But if you are going to accept public money, then you should be about the public purpose, the public trust, public accountability, and all the other things that come with being public. So by marrying it over and over, I hope we don't even see a law that will say charter schools. If we see one, I hope it will say public charter schools. And then it has to go in accordance with all those things we think are really important to hold dear for not only public education, but for every human being and citizen that we pay our hard-earned tax dollars to be an investment in. That should not be given to some other group that's committed to not public things, just using that money for whatever it's thing. So the authorizing group matters. I hope it will be our local school boards.
Do we have the cards for questions?
We have them right here.
Okay, you can start. Yeah, you can start.
Oh, to Alan Young. What do Iowa charters offer different than other public schools? And why would public schools choose to be converted into a charter school?
Well, in many cases, they are just really nothing different. That was the purpose on the front end. I will say this, but this is also typical here. In some states, there is not the ability for folks to move around. And I know that there are people who will love neighborhood schools and not love neighborhood schools, but the point is, in many places where there are only neighborhood schools, there becomes, people want to romanticize that, but in many of those places, people are stuck also with their neighborhood schools, and there's not a lot of movement. So in Iowa, as well as in Kentucky, there is possibilities for movement, at least in Jefferson County there is. And in Iowa, there was open enrollment as well, even not just within school or districts, between districts. So there was a lot of movement already. So because there have been so much push for magnet schools, theme schools, innovation schools, and that was in Iowa as well, and here, I don't think there's a lot of difference that they offer. The main difference, and this is why those are all really confusing as innovative schools, right? And it's ironic that sometimes a charter school might be a traditional school. Well, how innovative is that? But the notion is that it is the difference between a charter school and all those other kinds of schools is the charter. It's the charter. The charter means I'm going to put the thing in the group of hands of some other group. And in Iowa they said, no, you're not. You're going to still put it in the school board's hands. So there really wasn't a difference. In other places that could go to another group, an arts foundation. I mean, well-meaning groups or things like that. But they would have a different public purpose, wouldn't they? And that's the difference. So that's why I say it's really important how you craft that law, but otherwise there's really not that much difference. They can be very innovative, and they're public, and we can be innovative and public. It's just the charter that's different.
So, is that why there are only 3 now instead of more? Because they're not that different?
I think that, first of all, there were a lot of people who wanted them who were pushing an ideology and thought they would be way different. But when you actually ask the really hard questions, and it's really why it's all about the questions, you know, who will authorize them? So Susan's got some of those right questions, you know, what kinds of things? Will there be caps? All these different things. But less on the means. See, we have to have the purpose questions up front. What are these there for? And if you can get those be part of the conversation, it makes for a different law, and it makes for a different result. There was not a lot of places that could really offer something different that couldn't be found in our public schools. A few places in rural places, there's no doubt that they felt they were stuck, and so 3 or 4 districts would go together and come up with something that they could get more resources for and try something new. And so that ends up being maybe appetite for it. And there are no caps. As many people want to can apply. The other part is that when a group realizes I'm going to have to do all the same things that public schools do, I have to take the same kind of financial disclosure laws and all these other things, because those aren't red tape, those are safeguards with our public money. That when I'm going to have to do all of those things too, it's a lot of work for not much difference.
This is a question for somebody smarter than I. Does ALEC have a standard charter school bill that they dole out to state legislators? I would be surprised if they didn't. Is that what is likely to be proposed here, and what are its provisions?
Tell people what you used a name.
ALEC is the, I forget what they stand for.
American Legislative Exchange Council.
They're funded by the usual suspects.
Koch brothers.
The Koch brothers. And it's all about, you know, people should be getting money out of the state without really having to give back to the people who are paying them.
All right, any of you can answer. Want to speak to that? Susan, you want to speak to that?
I would join the ALEC almost certainly has a recommendation. I would say, having looked at the charter bills that were filed in the last 2 sessions, they looked to me like they had a bunch of Kentucky customization, as though legislators were in fact sitting down and thinking about some Kentucky issues as they wrote them. I have occasionally seen a bill come rolling through. I have seen bills roll through before where the people advocating for them would not take questions and would not consider any amendments. And I was pretty sure I knew what was happening. But the charter discussion seems at least a little more open than that, even among the very zealous advocates. If there's a little more room to discuss, then we're now doing what our overlords have specified. It's more like a Kentucky discussion than that.
I want to ask Representative Marsden, what can you tell us about what's been proposed in the legislature?
Well, we don't know what's coming. They have had a more Kentucky flavor. Brad Montel did a lot of the proposing from Shelby County, but now he's been promoted to some big job, and he's making getting his hat to eat with it. They all hate, right? But I really think it's going to be probably more ALEC, because now they've got 64 votes in the House of Representatives, so they can really do whatever they want. And I think what's so important is for all of us and to have this information to bring forward, to talk about public charter schools and transparency and accountability, and really have them on record, and make sure that local school districts and school boards have the authority to approve or disapprove of them. So, but we don't know what they're going to do now, because who knows?
So nothing's been refiled, anything that you know about?
I haven't seen anything yet.
I looked today, there wasn't anything.
And you're absolutely right, Stephanie, right? Because there's like 10 legislators that have any educational background that are going to make decisions on really crisis, really important education issues. Of course, they don't care. They make healthcare decisions for women all the time. They don't care.
I would just say, if anybody wants to see the ALEC agenda, it's there on their website. You can look it up. You can Google it. It's there. Yes.
And it's the American Legislative, say it for everybody again. American
Legislative Exchange Council.
Right, okay.
And last couple little comments just with regard to this is that, so there is an opening for them to do something different than what they were doing now that they have all houses and so forth. So that would be, I think, one of the things we ought to strategically look for. And if we see it, I would say, why is it that you're going with something that's so not like Kentucky? You know, and really call them back to at least start from the bills they have been looking at, which are more authentic and homegrown. What happens when ALEC comes in, and the reason you didn't have a lot of that last year is why would they? They're going to go to states where they can ram their stuff through. But now that they can ram their stuff through, my guess is we'll see them here. But here's the thing. They often put people in compromising situations. So this is where we have to go and talk with our Republican legislators and try to get them to be true to Kentucky, true to kids, true to these purpose parts of public education and so forth, because it's going to be hard for some of them if ALEC comes in, because what they do is they go and they say, if you do this, more money will follow for your elections,
Money in politics.
right? And if you don't, we'll primary you.
Right.
So I just want people to know that that's the environment, which is therefore why we really do have to build relationships with folks on both sides of the aisle in this case, because some of them are going to have to take what I will call now courageous stands if things come through, and we're going to have to say, how will we do this? And hopefully at least a little bit of my talk with the stuff in Iowa is that it doesn't have to go all crazy terrible if you have charters. If you can say, well, this is not because we have charters, we have public schools that are innovative, and we have public charters, but they have to be public.
All right, Yvonne, next question.
What are accessibility procedures to assure equity? How will disability educators be addressed in light of laws? And how will attribution